Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another one of our webinars. My name is Scott Morris. I'm the Director of Business Development for Gaming for GTS Distribution, which of course is the really fancy way of saying the board game guy. And we are here with a brand new partner who I'm really excited to introduce to y'all. I'm here with Lord and Lady. No, I'm not going to go that far. No. We're here with Tristan and Francesca from All or Nothing Games, and this is a new partner that ironically was actually introduced to us by another one of our exclusive partners, Frank West and City of Games. Most of you probably know him from the Isle of Cats, has done very well over the last few years. But Frank introduced me to Tristan and Francesca. We started to have some conversations, and we're now very happy to have this conversation to talk with you all about their two games that we're going to be carrying. They are available for pre-order right now. So as you hear about how awesome they are, as we have this conversation, you can set them up for pre-order, and they're going to be available in distribution for the first time later this year. But people don't come here to hear me talk or see my face, because my face was made for radio. So Lord and Lady Paul, we would love to hear from you guys. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, the company, and kind of why these games are so cool?
Sure. You want to start, or should I?
You go ahead.
So I'm Tristan. That's Francesca, in case there's any confusion. We started the company about 7 years ago now, back in 2015, and Gloom of Killforth is my love letter to Dungeons and Dragons and Tolkien and all things fantasy. And back when I designed this game, the reason I designed it is because although I avidly collected every single fantasy adventure game on the market, at the time, all those games were about fighting monsters and killing them and taking their treasure. And for me, growing up, role-playing was all about the stories that you developed, the people that you met, the places you explored, the adventures you go on, and then occasionally a little bit of monster bashing and treasure hunting as well thrown into the mix. So I wanted to make a game that reflected that more and had more of a focus on the storytelling elements. And I think it gelled with quite a few people. I had a little bit of a following on the internet because I was making like fan-made variants for games like Lord of the Rings and the Dungeons and Dragons Adventure System games. And these sort of fan-made scenarios and characters that I was designing were getting like tens of thousands of downloads on the internet. And I was thinking, well, if my if my mods for other people's games are doing all right, maybe my own games would do okay. So we took Gloom of Killforth to Kickstarter back in 2015, and it funded successfully, and now it's going into its fourth print run, which is the one that you guys will be hopefully getting in a few months' time. And I think part of its enduring appeal is that we've made it with the idea being it could go toe-to-toe with anything else on the market. So my high bar was to make it as physically beautiful as the Lord of the Rings, the card game. So we worked with an amazing team of international artists who take the ideas that I come up with and make them a million times better by delivering these amazing, beautiful illustrations. So Gloom of Killforth alone has nearly 300 unique images in the base game alone, which there's no other game really that does that in like a medium box sort of game. So it's not like a deck builder where you're getting 20 copies of the same goblin card and shuffling in every single card that you meet in the game. It's like a unique little adventure vignette in itself with a little bit of flavor text. And the idea is you start off as a hero, you choose your race and your class, and you go adventuring in this fantasy world, which is slowly being engulfed in this insidious gloom, the Gloom of Killforth. And you've got to battle through that and meet people and go on adventures and gather allies and earn titles and have like a sort of classic heroic fantasy adventure. But it's not like a campaign game where you need to have the same group every week for 10 months to finish all the adventures. It's like it's just a classic from zero to hero story in one evening. It's like a big sort of movie rather than like a TV series. So
that's exciting actually when you think about it, because I mean you made the joke about having to have the same group for 10 months and everything, and that has been something that has come up in conversation many times on these calls with publishers where legacy games come out and people they're very grand, they're very big, and people love the idea of them, but then that notion sinks in of, we're still in the pandemic and kind of fighting through things like that. And it's not easy to get together, let alone get together every week, get together through like 13 or 15 campaigns or anything like that at all. Right. And being able to tell a group that, maybe you have a group that's a role-playing group and normally they wouldn't play board games, but you say, hey, we got this awesome thing that is going to allow us to do same thing we do with role-playing type stuff, but in a completely new way. That's going to be a big enticement for them to do that, especially if they know, hey, we can play it this week and then go right back to playing role-playing next week and then bring out Killforth whenever we want at another time and kind of bounce between the two at their own leisure. They're not like, restricted to, well, once we start, we're in this for a year or anything like that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like a logistical first world problem, isn't it? It's like you've got this beautiful game that's got like hundreds of adventures in it, but you have to get the same team together every week to play it to its conclusion, sort of thing. Those are some of my favorite games. I can't lie. I love the legacy games and the big campaign adventure games, but very often, as you say, the theory of it is far more enticing than the practicality of getting it to the table and playing it through. So
and with Killforth, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but from my experience and seeing the game in motion, it's a game that offers a lot of replayability to where if you do play it in one evening and you have this grand epic adventure, it's not like you're done. Like it's not a one and done type thing. It's you can come back to this and make different decisions and have totally new things crop up that you haven't even, done before. Again, not in that legacy perspective where something you did in the last game is affecting this game, but just literally sit down and have a whole new adventure every time you play the game.
That's definitely was my intent, was that each card should matter and each card should tell its own story. And whereas with some games, like with deck building games and that, it's like cards are a currency, and you're like, right, I've got 15 swords, so I'll play all those swords down. I've got 15 gold, I'll play all those gold down. Whereas in Gloom of Killforth, each card is a character that may be a recurring character or a nemesis enemy that's going to stay in play, or a shrine that stays on the board, and you can explore that shrine and you can go there and heal and have all these kinds of mini adventures within a wider narrative. And to try and give it as much replayability as possible, I filled it with all of the sort of character tropes sort of thing from Dungeons and Dragons. So you pick your race, you could be a dwarf, an elf, a human, or an orc, and then you pick your class. So you could be a ranger or a warrior or a rogue. And then you pick a saga, which is your own hero's personal story. And that's like a series of chapters that you're working towards. So you always have a goal. It's not just like you're dropped into this world and you don't know where to go. You have this kind of your own personal saga, which is telling you, these are the options that you might want to take, but it's not sort of scripting you into a specific thing that you have to do. You don't have to, it never gets to the point where you have to read reams of flavor text while everybody else sits there and listens, sort of thing. It's sort of, it skims you along in the story, and you develop that story as you go because of the keyword system that it uses, which is each time you defeat an adventure or you meet a character or you explore a place, you gather these keywords together, and these keywords tell your hero's tale. And so the way that you gather them means that you'll have a different experience each time you play. Even if you were to play the same, dwarf priest doing the same saga, and you were to play the game 10 times in a row with that same character combination, it would still play out differently every time because of the way that you explore the map and the way that the encounters come out and approach you and stuff. So I think part of its enduring appeal, and the reason why we still have backers sharing session reports on our Facebook groups and everything, 5 years after its release, is because they're still playing it, because they're still getting new experiences out of it, new tales, which was definitely my design goal. And then sort of competing with that is the second game in the series, which I think we're going to talk about as well, Shadows of Killforth, which is very much like a sequel, like a directly compatible sequel game. So whereas Gloom of Killforth is based on kind of Western European fairy tales and orcs and dragons and monsters and knights and stuff, Shadows of Killforth takes place in the imaginary sort of Eastern realm of Killforth, where you get to play as ninjas and samurai, and you're fighting against Bakemono and Onis and like all different kinds of creatures. So it's the same system, but it gives me an opportunity to give all different characters, heroes, skills, abilities, and everything else. So it just, and again, another nearly 300 unique images in the game. So it's a whole new experience in the same world. And part of the design for me, or part of just being creative, is listening to music. And so Francesca, being our resident composer and pianist, has designed a soundtrack for Gloom Killforth, the full suite of music. And it's all based on the themes, the gloom, and this idea. And it's not like it's not a requirement that you listen to it, but it sort of immerses you in the theme, right? It's about having that multimedia experience of the environment. So you can play this whilst you can listen to music whilst you're playing the game, and it's like how I was designing it was you were playing the piano at the same time, and that sort of fed into the ideas that I'd come up with for the games. And
I was sorry, I'm not laughing. I'm just sitting here wondering if people think that we're like Penn and Teller, and that I don't actually speak. I do speak. Just, as you can tell,
I do have this image now of like Tristan with all these papers laid out over the table, like trying to design, and you're in the back in this white angelic outfit, just playing the piano, like, you know, having this like music.
The wind's blowing in a hat.
Right, yeah.
Boys, he's Neil Tennant, and I just stand there in the background pressing.
Right. That's funny. That's funny. Now you touched on something there that I think is a good thing to kind of call out, actually, with the retailer, so that they know. So there's Gloom of Killforth and there's Shadows of Killforth, and while the two are in that kind of same universe, you don't necessarily need to play one to know about the other, right? Like if I decided to start off with Shadows, I'm not necessarily missing anything other than the gameplay and the stories from the first one. It's not something where, like, you know, if I hadn't seen, you know, Book of Boba Fett episode 5, I don't understand what's going on in episode 6 kind of thing, right?
Absolutely, yeah. They are compatible. So you could take the adventures from one game, or the characters or the heroes, and chuck them straight into the other game as well, because it uses the same mechanics and just introduces new sort of rules, elements, and mechanisms as you go along. But they are completely independent. So we have some people who only play Shadows, or some people who only play Gloom, and then some crazy people who will mix them together and just like spread, because the game's like it's made of you play on a map of 25 cards, which makes up the world, like all these different locations. And what some guys do is put all the locations from both games together and just fill the table with like 50 cards.
Oh, wow.
And go on these like gigantic epic I already think of it as like epic fantasy, because you're going, you know, you're having these huge journeys and everything. But some of the more hardcore players will double that basically, and just like be playing it for 4 or 5 hours at a time, sort of thing.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And on our product pages, as retailers are looking these up, they're also going to see additional products, right? So we have the base games for both Shadows and Gloom of Killforth, but then in addition, for Gloom of Killforth, there's the Encounters expansion, there's the Dark Gloom expansion, and then for Shadows of Killforth, there is the Dark Shadows expansion. Can you kind of talk a little bit about those and kind of what they add and bring to the game?
Yeah, sure.
The Dark Shadows came about, didn't it? Because Dark Gloom was because we were a team, and we check everything together, and we wanted to make the game as family friendly and all inclusive, especially because we have a son who enjoys playing as well. And I think when Gloom came out originally, he was about 5, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But he loved playing it. But it just made it brought it home that this is a game that could be for family, you know, could be for all ages. But some of the artists, when they sent through the artwork, we obviously went through it all together, didn't we? And we were looking at it. Some of it was quite racy or quite horrific.
Or dark,
yeah. And we were like, well, where do we want this game to go? You know, do we want it? These images are stunning, but do they? And Tristan's very good. He always, you know, he'll always come and sanity check things. We call it sanity checking, but we check everything together to make sure that we're not being exclusive, that we're not excluding anyone. So we did take out some of the art or modify some of the art to make it more family friendly, make it less dark. But then we got calls from some of the backers to say, hey, we want that original artwork, don't we?
So obviously you're never going to please everybody, but we did everything that we could to try and please the people who wanted sort of a really gritty, dark fantasy world, whilst also not pushing away people who would be turned off or, disappointed with that kind of imagery. So, for example, the Gloom of Killforth base game, I would say the characters are very moderately dressed, whereas like some of the racier pictures where, the artist had sent something through and it, like, I guess, you could say like a chainmail bikini type female warrior or something, like perhaps wouldn't be appropriate for everybody. So we would say, okay, well, can we cover her up, kind of thing, and we'll keep the original art that can go in expansion. If somebody wants to see it, they can see it. And sometimes as well, the artist will go off on like a tangent maybe, or I mean, I take full responsibility as the art director. But for example, we have one card in the game where it's like a dark cult that you're fighting against, or you're trying to undermine. And the idea was that there was a person being sacrificed on an altar, which is a bit of a dark image. But the original image came back, and it was babies on an altar, which was I'm not laughing. Well, I shouldn't be laughing, but it's like super dark, and so that was definitely one that we decided would get edited out, and but then when we spoke about it during the campaign, the Kickstarter, there was an outcry of people that wanted to see that original art. So that goes into the dark expansion. That's like look at this at your peril kind of thing.
And it's not graphic. It's just to be clear. I wouldn't allow that.
Yeah, there's no nudity or anything like that, but it's anything that's sort of a little bit on the cusp.
And it's just difficult because it's a fantasy world. It's fantasy art. And so it's trying to find that sensible balance between allowing the freedom of fantasy, and there are no limits, there's nothing, and also just being sensitive to the world we live in, and how people are going to view that, and how we represent ourselves as a company, the products that we're putting out there. That's important to us. As a small family run company, it's just the buck stops with us. It's the two of us, and that's it. So we
take all responsibility for it. And we've tried to do it both ways as well. So like with Gloom and Shadows of Killforth, we have these alternate darker art packs, but since those we've released another game. I won't go into too much detail. As Scott's mentioned, we could potentially bring more games to the market if there's enough interest in that. But one of our games, Vale Wraith, which is set in the same world after the end of Killforth, like after the world's been destroyed, we kept the more grown-up art in the base game and added the more modest art as an expansion to see how that would fare, and how people would respond to that. And the modest artwork expansion box didn't do anywhere near as well. So it's like the appetite for that darker sort of artwork is obviously there in our market. But yeah, we're always just trying to learn what's best and what helps our backers and our customers the most. So we just pay attention to what people say.
Yeah, and it's nice to know from because these are big games, right? They're not like this is not let's sit down and we'll play in 15-20 minutes. Like, this is an adventure game, and most adventures are not done in 15 minutes, right? So
correct. This is your evening. If you're playing this game, that's your evening. Yeah.
I always call them commitment games, right? Things that it's like, hey, we're going to sit down and we're going to do something tonight, right? And this is what it is. So, but it's just nice to know that, from a retail perspective and from a consumer perspective, that, if they pick the games up and they love them, there's more to the games than just the games themselves, having those expansions available. The other thing, and you touched on a little bit, and this is good for our retailers to know, while we are beginning this partnership with Gloom of Killforth and Shadows of Killforth in the product line, there are other games that All or Nothing produces, not just on the fantasy side, but also on the historical kind of war side of things as well, which have also done extremely well. So as this partnership grows, the more successful it is, the more opportunities we'll have to bring more things like that to you on the retail side. So, definitely from the retailers who are watching this, if you like what you're seeing, if you are interested in what you're seeing, if you want more of what you're seeing, let us know, leave a comment below, of course, or you can reach out to us anytime and let us know. But this is something that, we feel these two titles are really strong. They're going to be very, very good from the get-go, right out of the box. They're going to align to a lot of the things that a lot of our retailers already carry in store. A lot of other games will kind of be this kind of larger scale fantasy type stuff. So it'll be very familiar to a lot of your purchasers and a lot of your consumers as well. Can you talk, and I don't want to ask you like on the cuff to like spoil anything or anything like that, but you talked about kind of the next Killforth. What is your plans for Killforth long term? Like, do you see one or two or three more games coming out down the line, or is that something that right now you've got these two, the third one that was just on Kickstarter, and then kind of possibly maybe other things to explore and things like that?
Yeah, so I think unwittingly or otherwise, Killforth is kind of our brand, like in a way, because it's based on the fantasy world that I created back in the day for my characters to explore in D&D. It's like my own like fantasy world. So there's a lot of sort of creative material for me to be able to draw onto, which is what I use to draw on for these games. So it's an exciting prospect to be able to explore different elements and areas and geographies of that world. So the third game in the series, which you mentioned briefly there, we've only just funded on Kickstarter, but it has been our most successful ever. And that introduces the high seas and pirates and like sea monsters and those kinds of adventures into the world. So from my point of view, there's always different sort of exciting backdrops and characters and monsters and things that you can throw into the mix. But also, I think creatively, there's kind of there's potentially a limitation based on how much you can reintroduce into the same system. So as much as I love these games, I don't know if I could just do one a year sort of thing,
Sure,
so part of that has led to creating different game systems, but using the same kind of mythologies. Sure. So in Gloom of Killforth and Shadows of Killforth, you're fighting as heroes to save the world from darkness and gloom and baddies and demons and all this kind of stuff. So the game that followed those, so we do the history games as well, which we maybe mention a bit later as well, but one game that I designed, which we delivered last year, is called Vale Wraith, and it imagines what happens when the heroes lose, and the world falls into darkness and all color and life is sucked out of the world, and you're left with this bleak, grey, barren landscape. And in this environment, you are dropped in as a kind of an ethereal creature called a Vale Wraith, who is given a chance, like a one last chance by a twist of fate, to go back and undo this deadly gloom that has ended the world. And so it's like from an aesthetic perspective, it's completely different. It's different artwork based on the characters that you've already seen in the Killforth games, but all black and white and all monochromatic and very strange and ethereal. And it's all about the memories of the world gone before. And the gameplay is entirely different. There's no dice, like Gloom of Killforth has dice in it. Vale Wraith is a card game. So from a creative perspective, in terms of like the story and narrative, that was really exciting for me to really sort of, rip up what had gone before and try something new, but also mechanically to come up with a different game system using the same world was a real sort of
pretty tough.
It was nice. It was fun, and I got really excited about the system as well, because in a way, following the same games in the Killforth series, I'm almost competing with myself by trying to reinvent the wheel with that same game system, whereas being able to throw that away and do another system entirely in the same sort of creative space is a lot more freeing. So I'm not saying that these games will end with Call of Killforth and it's 3 and done, but I see it as a world of Killforth, kind of, where we can do all these different offerings, and maybe that you could fast forward 2,000 years into the future and have a science fiction game based in series, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, it's
that. It sounds to me like you have a book deal and a movie deal shortly coming. But no, in all seriousness,
the Netflix pitch. That's the next thing,
right? Hey, you never know. You never know, right?
They make anything, right? I've seen their shows.
Yeah. No, world building to me is very important, because when it's done right and you can engross somebody in that world where they feel like they want to live there, like it feels so real that they're like, this is where I want to like spend my time. that develops a lot of loyalty to the brand and to the products, right? Where you could, release something that's just like a new Killforth game, or like you said, you could release something that's a totally different style of game, completely, different mechanics, different size, different price, everything, and still have people wanting to clamor for that stuff. They want to collect everything they can. I have a firm belief myself that most people in the board game industry on the consumer side, myself included, tend to be collectors first or driven by that collector mentality. And when they love something, they want all of it, right? So it's like, I love Shadows. I need Gloom. I need this. I need this. I need that. Like they've announced, Killforth toothbrushes. I need those, right? Those, that's the
Get
kind of thing.
quick.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, it's a step to Netflix, right? So I'm good. So, but no, I think that's really exciting. It definitely does sound like a book type environment, right? Like when I think about growing up with things like Tolkien or Dragonlance and things like that, it sounds like that's maybe, some of the things that kind of inspired you to kind of create this world as well.
Hugely. It's funny you mentioned Dragonlance. That's literally the bedtime story that I'm reading to our son. We're going through the Dragonlance Chronicles right now.
Nice.
After having done all of the Tolkien, the Silmarillion, and everything else, we're on to Dragonlance. But yeah, those are huge influences on me growing up, and to like the notion of being able to give something back. It's like a fraction, like a tiny percentage of that sort of creative element that had an impact on me. Is super exciting. I always wanted to write a book when I was little, when I was growing up, and in a way, this is my sort of way of doing that, because the games have about 30,000 words of flavor text in it, which is almost like a novella in itself. On every card, if you they all have their own stories and stuff. So, and people have asked, backers have asked for that. Can we have a book from the world? Can we see an art book? Can we have a game book? Like I don't know if you read the fighting fantasy choose your own adventure type books, and so yeah, I'd love to do all those things, time permitting.
That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, just as a reminder, I want to make sure retailers know everything we've talked about, everything you've seen here today, that for Shadows of Killforth and Gloom of Killforth, all of that is set up in our catalog right now. You can pre-order it right now. We do have it in motion. We've already placed our orders with All or Nothing Games, and that is on its way. As I'm sure everybody knows, shipping and logistics are super easy right now. They're like, what goes wrong? Thankfully, things are getting better, which is good. It's kind of a sign that we've seen. But just so everybody knows, we do have that already in process. So any pre-orders you place, that'll get put in our system. And then when we receive the product here later this year, we'll be making more announcements and notifications around what the release dates are going to be. And then your account managers from GTS will be in touch with you to make sure that hey, you guys have pre-ordered, X, that's coming in. It'll be available for you. But definitely take some time to check it out. I would highly recommend it. These are games that they blew me away when I first saw them in terms of scope and what they actually were from a physical product. As most of the retailers know who listen to me on these webinars, I have a very, very strong and high passion around merchandising product and making it look like something that people want to pick up. Because to me, at the end of the day, when someone walks into a retailer store, the most important thing that they can pick up is a box. If they pick up their phone, you have a completely different issue, right? So being able to see a box on a shelf that speaks to you, that you like, that may be familiar to you or maybe new to you, whatever it may be, once somebody picks up that box and looks at it and flips it over and looks at the back, it becomes more of like a tangible sale. This is mine. I want this. I have to have this, right? I'm going home with this. And the artwork on both of these games is very, very stunning. Like Tristan had mentioned about all the different artists that they work with. This is a game that if you do well with high fantasy type products in your store, it's going to fit in very, very nicely. And it's going to look very much as part of the family, so to speak, with everything else that you have. But then on top of that, you open the box and you just have dozens, if not hundreds of adventures that you can go on. And from a player standpoint, to me, that's a lot of value, right? When you look at games that are on the market today that, are 50, 70, 100, sometimes even $150 at retail, you want to make sure you're getting value for what you're putting into those games. And for me, and I know a lot of other consumers, and I know a lot of retailers, because a lot of retailers, you know, have these conversations with their consumers that walk in the door, being able to say, this isn't just a game you're going to buy once, play once, and then put on the shelf is a very important thing, because you want, like most of us, we don't ever want to just put something on the shelf. We want it on the table, right? That's where we want it. So it's all good stuff. I do fully expect, just to make sure this is on record, I do fully expect by the next time we talk that both of you do have an official Lord and Lady title next time. So Lord and Lady Killforth has a nice ring to it. So I think that works really good.
We'll get the lawyers on it.
Right?
People, change our names.
It's funny, I just found out, completely off topic, but somewhat related. I just found out from an article and from a friend of mine that back, whatever it was, a decade ago or so, when Vin Diesel was filming Chronicles of Riddick, he actually hosted a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and one of my favorite people on the planet, Dame Judi Dench, was in that game.
Oh.
And
I heard that story.
my brain like blows up when I hear that, because I just think that would be amazing. But yeah, you know, if you can somehow work out, Francesca, to get that Dame title by next time, let me know. That would be awesome. But no, I really appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to our retailers. You know, this is an important thing, especially since this is the first time you guys are being carried in distribution. That's probably a great thing to call out for the retailers as well, is that we, GTS, we're the only distributor that's carrying the product in the US right now. So this isn't necessarily a quote unquote exclusive relationship in that standpoint. It's just that we really like these. We thought that they would be very, very good for you and your retail stores. We wanted to bring them in and offer them to you. So like I said, right now, pre-orders are open. Get them in as soon as you can. We'll make sure to notify you when the products come in later this year. And like I said, if things go very well with this relationship, there's a lot of other opportunities. There's more games in that All or Nothing catalog. There's obviously more games coming from what Tristan had mentioned earlier and some of his ideas. And one day we hopefully can all look back on this video and say, oh, I knew them when they have their movie carpets and everything. So,
I was there back when they were cool.
right? That's awesome. No, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime. And retailers, if you have questions, let us know. Feel free, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment below. We'd be happy to get you answers and get things back to you. Of course, you can always reach out and contact your account managers, and you can reach out and find me as well. I'm really easy. You can just email me at smorris@gtsdistribution.com. But until we see you next time, have a great time in your stores. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.